shares of Twitter are under pressure after several accounts, including those of high-profile figures like Joe Biden, Warren Buffett, and Elon Musk, in addition to companies like Uber and Apple, were hacked in a crypto scam yesterday. Tweets basically said, send Bitcoin and the celebrity will double the amount. Twitter support says the company believes it was a, quote, a coordinated social engineering attack. Here for another take on this is Alex Hammerstone. He's the head of risk management at the cybersecurity consulting company Trusted Sec. Good to see you this morning, Alex. I think the general consensus is that this hack was rudimentary and it could have been a lot worse. What is worse? What does a worse hack look like on Twitter potentially?
So there are a number of ways this could have been worse. I think it's important, of course, to define the term hack. When we think of hacking, we think of kind of the Hollywood hack where someone's writing code and exploiting flaws in a system. But all indications appear that this was somehow an internal thing where an internal employee with the access was either compromised or paid or what have you. And so it's a little bit different than what you might think of as a traditional hack. It's more of a social engineering type hack. But it could have been much worse in many ways. Whether this had happened, late October, early November with the election coming up or things like that, or if it had been used for different purposes. It feels like a pretty straightforward Bitcoin scam, something that you see pretty often in different ways. But on this one, obviously, taking over these accounts was a bit of a twist on it. But there's certainly other ways that it could have been much worse.
Do you think that this is just the people, whoever was behind this, this is their way of saying, look out, because things are going to get worse? I mean, look, we're in a very sensitive time now as we head closer to the election. What should and can Twitter take away from this and other social media companies?
So as far as it being kind of a warning shot or something larger, it's certainly a possibility. But oftentimes, the Bitcoin scams are just, kind of the people that are into Bitcoin doing what they do. This is a pretty typical type of thing. But when it comes to what organizations can do, it's really, when you think about it, people need to have access to the data. They need to have access to systems in order to run the company and perform certain functions. If you're on a plane, no matter how many systems that plane may have for safety, there's still a pilot up front, that can do certain things and cause issues. And so really, making sure, number one, that nobody has full access that's not monitored in some way, making sure that something that's going to cause a really bad effect requires more than one person. So it's not all kind of in one person's hand. But it really comes down to really just monitoring what these accounts that have all this access are doing and making sure that you're notified right away when something fishy is going on, so you can react and shut off the access or do what's necessary.
Alex, this was also out this morning. Russian hackers are being blamed on COVID-19 related targets. Do you think this is another warning sign?
That there's some speculation there. I think the fact of the matter is anytime you flip on the news or open a newspaper, organizations are getting hacked all the time. And a lot of them, even with smaller companies, it's so common now it's not even in the news. It's just something that we're dealing with every day. And so to kind of draw that connection, I'd need more information. But certainly, as we get closer to the election, I think you're going to probably see a lot more of these things. Because remember that in order to, cause issues in the U.S., you don't necessarily need to get into the systems and change the results. You just need to create the perception that you can do it or that it has been done. And there you're really fomenting discontent and, causing issues, societally in the country. So it's not necessarily just about being able to change things, but also creating that perception that you can't trust anything.
Well, then let's look at this from 30,000 feet. Does this particular hack make the case, yet another case, that there should be some form of regulation on Twitter and Facebook? You have both companies out there essentially disseminating information. They've both dealt with hacks. Why shouldn't they be some form of public utility?
So there are some regulations, obviously, around anyone that has private data, whether it's in the United States or in Europe or other places. So there is regulation out there. Obviously, there's a lot of laws that have been in place for a long time, that go back that, look at a lot of these forums where users are able to post their opinions and thoughts that the actual company is not responsible for what they're posting. So it's really something that's been threatened to change, to have them, have more responsibility. As far as it being a utility, that's a very good question. Certainly with the internet, it can be seen as a utility, with students needing it and things like that. But when it comes to social media, really users are still choosing to use it. Even if there's no other platforms that have this kind of number of users, But at the end of the day, you're still free to not use these platforms if you so choose.
Now, we also saw that the accounts that were hacked, these high-profile Twitter users, had verified accounts, right? That coveted blue check mark next to their name. What does this tell us about those verified accounts? I mean, does a blue check mark even mean anything anymore?
Well, I think from that point, if you're looking to get your message out to the most people, to scam the most people for Bitcoin, you would want to use the accounts with the most reach. And obviously, the accounts with the most reach are the ones that will tend to be verified. And so I think that's certainly an element of it. But again, if you're looking at it, if it's what it appears and it is somebody gaining access from the inside, then again, they're going to have access to all accounts, right? So not just the verified accounts. They're going to have access to all accounts. And so they seem to have chosen the accounts that have the most reach. Because again, if you're advertising something or putting a scam out there, you want the most targets possible. And by using these accounts, you're certainly going to have a larger reach. Now, one thing that's interesting is, with politics aside, is that the president's account was not compromised, which I think probably tells us that there may be some additional controls on that account where it's not able to be altered by one employee.
Alex Inespere here, and you touched upon this earlier, but if you could expand. So do you feel that social media users won't really be deterred by hacks? I mean, they will just keep using social media as much as they did before, despite these hacks?
Absolutely. It's just the fact of the matter. If you look at really any organization that's been hacked or had issues, it's really become the norm. I think people expect it now. I hate to say that. If you look at a lot of retailers, if you have a product people want, if you look at, companies, if you have two companies that sell an identical product and one is cheaper, but it has better data security, or the more expensive company has better data security, people aren't going to go pay for that. They just don't. And there's certain industries where that may be a little bit different, like banking or finance. But really, it seems, especially with people cooped up, with all the lockdowns and everything else, people are on social media more than ever. And I think, to get people to kind of pull their phones out of their hands, and go outside and do something else is just not going to happen in 2020 the way we are as a society. It's just unlikely.
Alex, is it reasonable? Is it reasonable to expect a more significant hack in the lead up to the election?
So what I will say is, I think that, everyone who's ever predicted a larger hack coming, at some point it has been correct, because they just keep growing. So, to that end, likely. I don't know about a hack per se, but certainly there will be continued efforts to really just create discord, in our society. And again, because you don't necessarily have to get into things and take data or change results or anything like that. You just really have to create the perception that it's possible. And then you'll see all the people on Twitter or Facebook, going out and claiming the election's illegitimate or whatever else it might be. So if your goal is to cause issues in the United States, that would be a great way to do it, right? I mean, just to make people not believe that what they're seeing is real. And when you start to question everything, it just really becomes a kind of a true element of information warfare.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.